Hey everyone, this is Adam back with the development roadmap video on the Introduction to Cardano course. This is my sixth take now of this video. I'm struggling to propose only true things about the development roadmap. Um, so in rewatching the videos, I always find myself saying something that just is slightly wrong, and I'd rather just redo the video and get it right in its entirety, one take it. So um, yeah, let's go for it. So the outline. The outline is here at roadmap.cardano.org, and the basic gist is that Cardano's development is split into five sections. We have Byron, which is the foundation of Cardano, Shelley, which focuses on decentralization of Cardano, Goguen, which is about smart contracts, Basho, scaling, and Voltaire, governance. This is a really good website. You can click on the different ones and see what kind of like high level what's going on in terms of the development in these sections. And the thing I like about breaking it down to five phases is that it's easily digestible and everything kind of falls into one of these categories. These are the main categories behind any blockchain. So maybe you'd have an interoperability one, although that kind of deals with smart contracts and scaling. So, um, but yeah, I like it. It's really easily digestible. I find anything that's broken down into its core components seems to work more than having just kind of a really big plan that doesn't have specifics. So this is really good. So we're going to talk about these five sections in this video. Um, The first three, Byron, Shelley, Goguen, they were kind of rolled out linearly. We've already done Byron and Shelley, we've passed those. And then Goguen, we're kind of at the back half of it, I'd say. We're still in it. Naturally, we'll always be in it. But uh, most of the hard work is done in terms of Goguen. Basho and Voltaire is where we are, where we're going. Kind of more parallel than the previous three, I'd say. Basho and Voltaire, they can be developed in parallel and deployed in parallel. And you kind of do today, you kind of need Voltaire to even deploy anything, to be honest. That's my opinion, at least. And then it seems to be getting harder and harder for Cardano to uh, evolve, which is good to a certain extent. And so Voltaire is going to assist in that because we do need to get it right. But Goguen, Shelley, and Byron, they were definitely developed in parallel as well, but it was more linear in terms of like actual deployment. So first, Byron, this is the foundation of Cardano, started in September of 2017 with the Genesis block, so the first block on the blockchain. We had a federated network, meaning only nodes that were allowed to join could join, mostly by IOG. Then we had Daedalus and Yoroi come out, which were both wallets, Daedalus being a full node wallet developed by IOG, and then Yoroi, the light wallet developed by Emergo. Um, and the technicals behind the Yoroi wallet are like the serialization library are heavily relied upon today. So this was a big thing for light wallets was Yoroi. Um, Ouroboros. So we talked about this in the blockchain video, but the white papers came out on Ouroboros, and they're still coming out today. They're still working on different white papers, I'm pretty sure. Um, and we've talked about Ouroboros a bit in the blockchain video. We'll have a full video on Ouroboros eventually. Probably not in this course, but there will be a video on it. And I do talk about it a bit in this next slide, which is Shelley. So um, Byron, we got everything set up. Shelley, now we're running here. We got decentralization. So now community run stake pools. Anyone can download Cardano node, spin it up, and pledge some ADA, run their own stake pool, and then accept delegations. So you have the idea of a delegation certificate. So an individual who doesn't run a stake pool is able to delegate their stake to the stake pool of their choice to help promote decentralization of the network and participate in um, the decentralization of the network. We had Ouroboros Classic, which was within the Byron era, BFT, which is in 2020, to my knowledge, and it allowed for the hard forks that we see today, which are not too hard. They're pretty, the soft forks, I would call them, or what would be a hard fork that just happens and we don't even really make it a big deal like other chains. So that's really nice, and that allowed for then Prouse to happen, which is what we are currently running as of February 2023. We're waiting on Genesis, so this is kind of a big topic right now. Again, February 2023 is the idea of Ouroboros Genesis. So this allows individuals to leave and join the network at will and not have to rely on trust of people who are already in the network. So there's a technical term for that, although I can't think of it right off the top of my head, but we're waiting on Genesis. So we talked about delegation, Bech32 encoded addresses. So yeah, we can see in this little picture below what the addresses used to look like with base 58 and Byron, and now what we see today with Bech32. And then also with the Mary hard fork, we got native token and multi-asset support. So the ability to have native tokens on the Cardano blockchain. We see a bunch of native tokens today: Hosky, Meld, World Mobile, Liquid, Sunday, Indie, a ridiculous amount of them. So I could name them, a ton of them, but we'll skip. There's I don't even know, thousands, I think, probably now. Okay, so then we got the Goguen era, and that allowed for smart contracts. Um, Shelley and Goguen are probably the two most important eras, I guess. Naturally, Basho, scaling and governance are ridiculously important, but for where Cardano was when we were entering these phases, these were extremely, extremely important. Decentralization, you can't have a blockchain without decentralization. Um, you can have one, but it ain't going, it's not going to work really well, and it's not going to be the blockchain of the future. So you need decentralization, and then smart contracts is what uh, I guess the second version of crypto relies upon, like the Ethereum smart contract, bringing smart contracts to um, blockchains, and then you need them, so it's super important to get it right. And this is the era that Cardano is not too strong in, if it's my opinion. So we had Alonzo, which is the hard fork that brought decentralized applications through Plutus and Marlow. So Plutus is the smart contract language on Cardano, and it's Haskell based or Haskell derivative. Marlow is a DSL, so kind of a drag and drop based language, and it allows you to code smart contracts that you can deploy on chain and then interact with. Um, so that was a huge deal. We got a bunch of different dApps from it. Like Sunday Swap was one of the first ones I remember. Um, which is a DEX, one of the first DEX. We had Muesli Swap, which actually was the first DEX, and now we have a whole bunch. Um, and then we had the Vassal hard fork, which allowed Plutus 2.0. And Plutus 2.0 gave three really big things: reference inputs, inline datums, and reference scripts. I linked them all here, and I'll briefly touch on them because they're super important and they made Plutus infinitely better. Um, but I won't say too much on them because it's kind of more technical than the video needs. So reference inputs, you can reference a datum that exists in a UTXO, which is an unspent transaction output, which is basically just um, what would you even call this? A UTXO is a unspent transaction output. So you have a transactions output, the amount of ADA within that plus everything else contained within it is within the UTXO. So a reference input, you could reference a datum of a UTXO at a script address. As I'm saying this, I'm realizing this is probably too much information for this video, so I'm going to skip this actually. Um, the gist of the three of them is that you can drastically reduce transaction sizes, which enables you to have more transactions within a block, and then more transactions per second because of it. So this was huge, and it also made it easier for developers in coding smart contracts, more intuitive with inline datums. So yeah, more TPS or less transactions that are smaller, so naturally less transaction fees and more transactions within a block. That's what Plutus 2.0 allowed. Um, and now most dApps use like the benefits of Plutus 2.0. So they've had to they revamped their smart contracts to use what Plutus 2.0 gave them. One more thing is that most smart contracts probably won't be developed in Plutus or Marlow, in my opinion, in the future. It's just partially because the language that they were based upon. Marlow, any institution is not going to really use a drag and drop thing. They will just pay developers to actually code it in the language that makes sense. Um, that probably won't be Plutus because it's a Haskell derivative. So nowadays we see things like Aiken and Eopsin, I think I'm saying that right, which are Rust and Python derivatives, respectively, um, that then compile to Plutus Core, which is uh, what allows it to be put on chain, if that makes sense. Um, so enough with that. And so, sorry, I'll just say quickly as well, the reason why I think we did this kind of poorly compared to the other phases is just because um, we chose Plutus. super nice language in that it gives us a whole ton of things like provable uh, that the transaction is provably valid, if that even makes sense. We can do a lot of good things within Plutus, but because it is a Haskell-based language and not there's not many Haskell developers, you naturally reduce the amount of developers. Um, I do think that was also the fact that we didn't have as many developers is kind of good, just because we didn't get caught in the scam phase of crypto like most blockchains did. Um, and that was because you couldn't really just copy paste code and get away with it because there wasn't really understandable code that you could copy paste. But now we're moving towards more modern language based development. So within the next bull run, currently again February 2023, within the next bull run, whenever that is, we'll probably see a lot. We'll be subject to a lot more scams like other blockchains, so we got to be careful. Um, but again, the bad part was that we didn't have too many developers, but we got through that, so we're good now. Basho, so the idea of scaling. We had the Vossel hard fork, which I don't know why I put it in Basho just because it seemed to be later in the Goguen era. So it was kind of more in the Basho era, even though it had Goguen like it's these Plutus 2. The idea of Plutus 2.0, SIP 31 through 33, and diffusion pipelining. So the diffusion pipelining adds to the scaling, but the Plutus improvements was Goguen. Um, Mithril. So Mithril is I linked it there. Again, out of scope of this video, but a technical protocol. And what it allows, one of the applications of it is full node synchronization speed being drastically quicker, or the amount of time it takes to synchronize your full node being decreased. When you use a light wallet, you're using someone else's full node, which means someone else's version of the blockchain. And to truly verify and not trust, which is the heart behind cryptocurrency or like the main mantra, is that you want the full node yourself. So being able to have Mithril will enable you to, what I hope is people would bootstrap their own node because it's really easy to do, and then they can just point their light wallet to that node, which is theirs. So Mithril is big and that's coming. Hydra, layer 2 solution, low latency, high throughput, minimum transaction costs. The idea of Hydra is that you open a state channel. So I need to read it more, so don't quote me on this, but the link is there so you can do your own research. My understanding um, from a brief look is that you have a kind of a they call it a state channel, but this area above the chain that you move the transactions into, you can transact a whole bunch of times within the state channel, and then when you finish, you close the channel, or what they call the Hydra head, and then bring the difference between the final state and the initial state back on chain with one transaction. So you can have a whole bunch of transactions. This would be good if you're transacting with the same person a bunch of times, and then when you decide you're done, you can then put it right back on chain. Uh, so you don't have to, um, what would you don't have to fill up the chain with a bunch of transactions, um, inflate the chain, I guess, inflate the size of the chain, and you don't have to pay the transaction fees um, of the chain. You would pay whatever the transaction fees of the state channel are, which would naturally be lower. So that's really good. Input endorsers. So the idea for input endorsers is that um, a lot of the reason for the block time being roughly 20 seconds is that you need time for the block to propagate the network. So a lot of the time you're just waiting, doing nothing. And so the idea is that you could have a bunch of blocks existing, and then you have key blocks every 20 seconds. And then the key blocks kind of point back, and then all the mini blocks in between key blocks would be able to be used. That's super high level, but that's not out yet. So that's another good scaling thing. And then recently, this month, I think, if not late January, the sidechain toolkit developed by IOG was released. So Basho is in full effect. Um, we're ready for it. We're in it. And then the main thing, the thing I think is most important, is Voltaire. Voltaire is the idea of governance. Right now, you have Bitcoin that struggles to, um, and to be fair, a lot of the Bitcoiners love this, doesn't improve, like doesn't change um, the raw structure of the network. There are no changes. You just whatever it is, that's the way it is, and that's the way it'll be in the future. Um, and that's really nice because it's dependable. It's not subject to third party. Uh, I don't know. It's reliable, I guess you could say, because it's never changing. Um, but naturally, as tech evolves, you're going to need to change some things, in my opinion. And so making sure you have the governance structure correct so that you can actually change those things is really, really important. Or you end up with Bitcoin caches and Ethereum classics, which are like split off from their original chains. So we had the Cardano summit in late December or late November, sorry, of 2022, and introduced in it was the Voltaire SIP. Um, I haven't had the time to read it all yet. It's pretty large, but I highly recommend it, and it's on my to-do list. I highly recommend everyone read it. It's super important. Um, and that's the idea of moving forward with Voltaire and how we're going to do that. There's a lot of things right now in the community, like, whoops, um, the idea of contingent staking. That's a big one as of right now. I'm going to look back on this video and laugh, I think, with contingent staking, but mid-February, contingent staking is a big concept. I'm not going to explain what it is. It's not really important. And there's a whole bunch of things that the community is steadfast on, increasing the importance of pledge. Um, and these things can't really be changed, especially now with like the modern environment behind the SEC and decentralization. It's hard to change things without being labeled as security. Um, so I think we need Voltaire to really make any future changes. And Voltaire is needed no matter what, so it's going to have to happen. Um, right now we have this thing called the Treasury, and we'll still have that, which right now is used to fund Catalyst, which is what we are funded through the Queens Cardano at Queen's University Club. We're funded through Catalyst Fund 9. So this whole video is made possible because of that. But the idea is that the treasury is supplied with a fraction of transaction fees, and then every quarter, roughly, any holder of ADA gets a vote on where the funds are allocated, and people can submit proposals to it. It's kind of just a experiment, I guess, of what Voltaire could somewhat look like. I think most people are not too happy with it. Um, and if you could, I think most people would like the idea of decreasing the amount of people that get money and increasing the funding for those people because it does seem to be there's like a group of core developers that do most of the stuff, and paying them more money would allow them to like spend more time and do things like that. So I think it would be better probably if it was changed a little bit, but nonetheless, and then the idea of Genesis keys is the last thing. So right now, to make an update, I guess in Genesis, I didn't know this until recently. There's 7 keys, 3 to IOHK, 2 to CF, and 2 to Emergo. Currently, the Cardano Foundation has delegated both their keys to IOHK, so they have 5 keys, and it takes 5 out of the 7 to update the protocol parameters. So IOG can just change the protocol as of February 2023, apparently. Um, so I'm assuming the Genesis keys would be referenced within the Voltaire SIP, and eventually they would be stripped from them. I mean, they'd have to agree on it, obviously, because they're the ones who can change the protocol right now. So they'd have to use the keys to strip themselves of the keys, which I guess needs to happen. Um, but that is kind of how protocol parameters get changed right now, February 2023. So, although I don't think they're going to be changed anytime soon or ever again without Voltaire. So those are the 5 phases. Hopefully this video wasn't too long. I'm aiming for 20 minutes. We have Byron, Shelley, Gauguin, Basho, Voltaire. Byron, 2017, you had a federated network. We started the blockchain. Cool. Shelley, we had community-run stake pools. Really, really important. We updated our Ouroboros version to now allow hard forks and Praus. We're waiting on the new one, Genesis, which is probably going to have to come out either this year, late this year, I'd imagine, or next year, because it's really, really important. Um, Delegation certificates, you can delegate even without running your own stake pool. We have native assets, super good. We got dApps. We have different languages. We improved the dApp language, which is Plutus. More being run in the background by community developers, or more being developed. More languages that compile to Plutus core so they can be put on chain. So that's really, really important. And you'll be able to, as of right now, you can develop in Python and Rust and JavaScript and all these things. But those languages are being developed so that you can actually fully do everything that you can do in Plutus with those, because I don't think you can fully do everything right now. Basho, we have scaling. The plan is completely set out. It looks super successful. Mithril, Hydra, sidechains, all open sourced. Um, I'm really excited for Hydra. I think that's probably um, the thing that's closest to being released and the most real as of the videos I've seen right now. In terms of like, here it is, it's coming. Um, Mithril will be super nice, just because you can run your own full node finally. Although you can do it right now, but it takes a lot of time. Voltaire, and then the governance. This is the thing that's most important to get right and going to be the hardest, and that everyone needs to work together to get right. Voltaire is, if there was ever a situation that Cardano goes wrong, it's with Voltaire. So this is the main thing to keep a lookout on. Thanks for watching the video on the development roadmap. Hopefully, I didn't say anything wrong, um, or I'll be doing a take 7. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.